those whose children died, those whose parents died, have never benefited from the financial support schemes and never received any compensation. And they are the focus of one of the Chair's recommendations and a recommendation for interim payments now. If we look at JEVA 40276, please, just to provide some further context to this issue. This is a letter sent by, I think, some campaigners to you at the beginning of this week. I don't know whether it reached you through your ordinary offices, but I know the inquiry has forwarded it on to you. We could just go further down the page, please, Lawrence. Yes, so I just want to pick it up with the paragraph beginning our journey. Our journey has been marked by immeasurable pain and loss. So Brian Langstaff's done commendable work in putting forth recommendations that offer a fair resolution. However, these recommendations still need to be fulfilled, our pleas echoing in what seems to be an empty hall. The appointment of the ALB's chair remains to be made. This delay denies victims and their families any tangible sense of progress. Many continue to die without seeing full redress. This cannot be right. And then it's the next issue that I want to explore with you, Prime Minister. The interim payment for deaths not yet recognised is critical. These payments are not just about compensation. They symbolise acknowledgement and they represent initial recognition of each life lost. We know, for example, that many of the 380 children infected with HIV died in childhood and their deaths remain unrecognised. Now, before I ask you, and I'm sorry, this is a long introduction to a question, but before I ask you the question, I'm going to ask you to look at something in the Chair's second interim report about the position of children whose parents died and parents whose children died. So if we could have, please, Lawrence, INQY 40453, and if we could go, please, to page 7, I think. I'm going to pick it up at the bottom of the page, the last paragraph, and then over to the next page. Colin was around a year old when he was given factor concentrate. At about 2.5, he was diagnosed with HIV. His parents, Colin and Janet Smith, gave evidence to the inquiry. His mother said he loved school, but he became too ill to go, really. I mean, sometimes he'd just say, I think I want to go to school today, and we'd put him in a wheelchair, wrap him up, and we'd get him literally to the door, and then he'd say, I want to go home now. His father recalled, I lost my job because the boss was scared of people finding out and losing customers. So within a week, I got another job. I thought, if we can go over the page, I thought I'd take a night shift job. Nobody around, nobody would know me, but the day I was going to start, he called me into the office and said he couldn't start me. So from that point on, I was basically unemployable. I went to the job centre, they wouldn't let me sign on. Colin died aged 7. His father said there's no way a child should have to die the way he did. It wasn't pleasant. It still affects us now. And it's not just our son, there's lots of children have had to go through that. I could cope with death, but not with the death of my son. I still have trouble today, the fact that he's in a grave on his own and the guilt will never go away. And then just one further passage, if I may, Prime Minister. It's the next one. Susan. Susan's 2 sons, I should say, were infected with HIV and died in childhood of AIDS. Susan, mother of Brian and Stephen, gave evidence to the inquiry. You think what might have been. I can only still see them as 9 and 16. But it's Christmas. A couple of weeks ago, it was Brian's birthday, but Christmas we put flowers on. And right after Christmas, it's Stephen's birthday. In the February, so more flowers. Then in May, it's Brian's anniversary. Then in September, it's Brian's birthday. And then in October, it's Stephen's anniversary. And pausing there, the anniversary she refers to is the anniversary of their deaths. And then we're back to Christmas again. And it doesn't matter how many years go by, you're still asking why? And I keep going to the grave and I keep saying, sometimes I think they're not there, they're going to walk in. I just think, no, it can't be. Why? I just want someone to tell me why. It won't bring them back. I just want them back so much. I just ache for them to come back. You can't get on with your life. I just ache. I think it's like a heartache. Your heart is aching so much. Your whole body aches. I'm just mentally and physically tired, I think. I just want them back and I can't. Now, those are just two examples, Prime Minister, as I'm sure you understand, of the groups of individuals whose deaths have and whose continuing suffering have never been measured or recognised through financial support or compensation. And they are some of those whose suffering would be recognised if interim payments were made. As you've told us, it took only a short period of time for the first lot of interim payments to be made. But nearly 4 months down the line from the recommendation in relation to interim payments to people who've never received anything, there is still no action on the part of the government. Is there any good reason, having regard to what you said last summer in relation to the first lot of interim payments, is there any good reason for the government delaying in taking a decision on the question of interim payments for these people?
I think the first thing I'd say is I have 2 young children, and I can't imagine the loss that Brian and Stephen's mother felt and Colin's parents felt, and as you said, there's hundreds more like that from everything we know, each one a tragedy for every one of those families, and it's heartbreaking to read it again and listen to it again as I've done previously. And they are absolutely uppermost in mine and everyone else's thoughts. With regard to what might happen in terms of future compensation, obviously that is one of the many recommendations in the report, and that is subject to ongoing government decision-making and policy-making, which is why it's difficult for me to speculate further or go into more detail about what may or may not happen in that regard. But of course, that work is ongoing. Questions of scope are important. There are significant questions that need to be answered as part of resolving this overall scandal and how best to do it. But because it relates to decisions that haven't been yet made, obviously there's not much more I can add to that.
Would you agree that the longer it's going to take for the government to reach conclusions about a compensation scheme overall, whether that's waiting for the final report, putting through primary legislation, appointing people, whatever it might be, the longer it's going to take, the greater importance there may be to the government considering further interim payments for those who've never received them, or indeed further interim payments for those who have. Is that something that government understands, that there's a relationship between how long you're going to take to set everything up and perhaps taking some interim measures now?
Yeah, again, Ms. Richards, for all the reasons that I've outlined, because all these matters are subject to ongoing government policy making and deliberation where final decisions haven't been made, I can't, and it wouldn't be appropriate to comment or speculate on what may or may not happen in the active considerations of government. But as I said, many people have been affected by this scandal over many decades, and an important part of resolving the scandal that is contaminated blood will be working through those issues of scope and eligibility.